So, Genevieve, take us through the advantages of AI for journalism.
One way to think about AI is it's a constellation of technologies and practices. So it's about data and sensors and algorithms and machine learning and telecommunications networks and storage sites, and then rules and regulations. And I know that sounds like a tremendous amount, which is why we just say AI. So step number one, it's not a single thing, it's a lot of things. I think the second confusion there sometimes is people say AI and they say it like it's a singular thing. There's an AI, or AI is out there. And the reality is that artificial intelligence is probably a better phrase, uncomfortable with an Australian accent, but still. And the reality there is that lots of different organizations and companies and governments have artificial intelligence systems working for them. And they are remarkably not alike from each other. Somewhere off to the far kind of east of you, there is a set of buildings that have smart elevators running an AI algorithm. And what that algorithm does is predict where in the building you are likely to be based on months of foot traffic. And the lifts are rearranging themselves in the lift shafts to anticipate where you're going to be. So in old days, you pressed a button and that summoned the lift. In this building, the lifts have a sense about where you're going to be and they're lurking around waiting for you. That's an AI. When you go home this evening, you might open up Netflix or iView and it will say, hey, Peter, it's you. Because you like this show, here are some other shows we think you'll like too. That's also an AI, but they are radically different from each other. And so one of the puzzles I think we sometimes have is thinking they're all the same thing.
So, okay. So how can AI support journalism in the future?
One of the ways to answer that question is to say there are already lots of things that are changing the way journalism happens that are sometimes confused with AI. So AI, as much as it is a constellation of practices, there's also a whole lot of things AI isn't the same as. So people use AI, and I think what they're actually saying is algorithms or enhanced automation or decision augmentation or even just big data, right? And all of those things, I think we can safely say, have been changing journalistic practice for, well, probably a century and a half. So when we think about data and data analytics, in journalism, in other forms of content production where we have storytelling, we've often used data as a way of saying, was this a story that resonated? Increasingly, what you also see in that space, however, would be other sorts of advanced automation, which would be a little bit new. So it's if you click this, it's starting to go find the other system, computational system, it in that sense, is going to find other things like that.
So a journalist is writing a story on Ukraine, and there's a wealth of information on the internet about Ukraine. And so the computer that she's writing on suggests other areas she can go, having written a paragraph on Zelensky. What about a brief bio on Zelensky, or the momentous iPhone post he did at the beginning of the war outside his palace? Is that enhanced automation, or is that actually artificial intelligence?
Well, I don't think of it as being artificial intelligence per se. I think of that as being, well, depending on what programs you were running, right? So I mean, we know that there's predictive activity sitting inside our computational objects. I don't know about you. I'm a terrible speller, and I remain profoundly grateful for Microsoft Word that can usually go, I think there's another I in that word. I'm sometimes worried about it where it wants to add words where I think that is not the word I meant at all. Those are not artificial intelligence, but they are an augmentation of the way we do our work. And they are in some ways forms of automation. And some programs, computational programs, are now taking that further.
Coming back to the original question then, hiving off artificial intelligence, which is kind of the ultimate of all these, how is that going to be useful to journalism in, say, 2035?
So the original definition of AI, when the phrase was coined back in the 1950s, was that it would do four things, basically. It would be able to understand human speech, not just be able to write it down, but understand it, so sense making. It would be able to understand abstract concepts and symbols. Knowing that blue and yellow aren't just colors, but a flag, and that flag means a nation, and that nation has a particular kind of configuration or sentiment. That's a significant leap in sense making, right? Third thing would be with these computational objects would be able to learn and change over time. And the fourth thing was to be able to do tasks currently reserved for humans. Now, what that would mean in the context of journalism is interesting, right? You and I both know that words are not as straightforward as they appear. Words have multiple meanings. Words are used in ways that are sometimes ironic or sarcastic or earnest. One of the very first progenitors of artificial intelligence used to tell this deeply and delightfully apocryphal story when he was working in the early days of trying to teach machines to understand human speech. And he used to sort of say, look, two problems here. He's like, you can tell the machine Mary had a little lamb. And in some contexts, it may think that's what Mary had for breakfast, because absent context, that's one reading of that. And the other story he used to tell was the day that they said that they had given the machine the phrase, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And it had come back, the meat is bad and the vodka is strong. Words are deployed not just for their literal intentionality, but for the work they can do symbolically.
Right. So really, despite the fairly profound things you've said, what you're telling me is it's going to be actually a long while before we actually know how actual artificial intelligence is going to be able to help journalism.
Yeah, but I think in the meantime, there are lots of places where journalistic practice is continuing to evolve.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Data and analytics and algorithms and automation and increased sort of augmentation, all of those things are already happening. And as in some ways, Peter, you would know better than I, all of those are also complicated. They make difficult power relationships. They make certain kinds of decision-making invisible. They preference certain kinds of voices and experiences over others. And journalism as a landscape has many of the same challenges that other landscapes and other ecosystems and business practices are finding as the sort of analytically driven, algorithmically driven, enhanced automation practices land.
I get that completely, but in the meantime, from now on, I'm going to be very careful about the use of the phrase artificial intelligence.
And as someone who spends her time explaining what AI is to other people, I think that would be good.
Genevieve, thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Peter.